How's it going? Thank you guys for coming back to episode 4. For everyone who's been following along to Dan's Big Book Deep Dive, I just want to give a quick reminder. Dan's new book is out. It's in the description of the bio underneath this video. Thank you guys for joining.
Great. And today we want to talk about chapter 3, more about alcoholism. And this we're going to, again, do more of a deep dive on really going into what alcoholism is all about and how we can actually try to convince ourselves that we're not an alcoholic. So, the idea that somehow, someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. The persistence of this illusion is astonishing. Many will pursue it into the gates of insanity or death. We learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. The idea that it would be any other was a delusion and it had to be smashed. And so this is the fact, and we talk about how it works, is you got to get honest with yourself that you have a problem. And left to your own devices, you will never stop. And we're going to go over that in here. So, and just remember, it never gets better, it always gets worse. So, despite all we can say, many who are real alcoholics are not going to believe it. I see it all the time. People come in and they think, oh, you know what? I'll just stop and everything will be fine and it'll all go. It never gets better, always gets worse. So, and when they've tried drinking only beer, limiting the number of drinks, never drinking alone, never drinking in the morning, drinking only at home, never having it in the house, switching from scotch to brandy. We all know about all of these trips. It always, it never works. Once you're an alcoholic and you take that first drink, the allergy starts and you're not going to stop. And this goes with a lot of other things too, with gambling and drugs, even some people with shopping or sex. You can't stop. So, and in this chapter, they go on to talk about a couple of people. A man of 30 was doing a great deal of spree drinking. He was very nervous in the morning. We know about that. Got to take the Bloody Mary. Okay. He actually had tried stopping on his own, and he did. Okay. He remained bone dry for 25 years and retired at the age of 55 after a successful and happy business career. Then he fell victim to the belief which practically every alcoholic has, that his long period of sobriety and self discipline had qualified him to take a drink. He tried to negotiate his way through that. And he attempted to stop, but he found he could not. Once he started, through a robust man of retirement, he went to pieces quickly and was dead within 4 years. Here's a guy who was sober supposedly for 25 years, not doing any of the work, not doing any of the spiritual awakening, just not drinking. And he thought he would be okay. And this is what happened. Once you're an alcoholic, you're always an alcoholic. To commence to drink after a period of sobriety, in a short time, it'll be as bad as ever and worse. There must be no reservation of any kind, nor any lurking notion that someday we will be immune to alcohol. Step one, you got to accept the fact that we cannot control our alcoholism. Uh, we just have to be sure of that. So the chapter goes on to talk about that. Uh, we have to assume that you want to stop. If you don't want to stop, nothing is going to change that. So they talk about another fella in here. We call him Jim. All went well for a while, but he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. He found himself drunk a half dozen times in rapid succession. On each of those occasions, we worked with him. Okay. He knew he faced another trip to the asylum. He kept on. Moreover, he would lose his family, but even that wouldn't stop him. So he has one thing which is kind of funny. He says in here, I came to work on Tuesday morning. What happened to Monday? You know what happened, right? So, and it just goes on and on. Um, he went on a trip on a drive. He was sober at the time too. He was into car sales. Uh, so all of a sudden he stopped in this place on the ride, and he was getting a sandwich. Suddenly it crossed his mind that if I were to put an ounce of whiskey in my milk, it couldn't hurt me on a full stomach. And he orders a whiskey and poured it into the milk. He vaguely sensed I was not being too smart. He felt reassured he was okay. And you know what happens then. This is the mental obsession we talk about, thinking that it might be different this time. And
Right.
it happens to so many.
I believe that's the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right?
This is why it says in the second step we get restored to sanity. The sanity is knowing that if I do it again, it's going to be bad. Insanity is thinking it's going to be different. So that's why we need that. So he had much knowledge of himself, yet for all the reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of a foolish idea that he could take whiskey if he mixed it with, well, this is pure insanity. So the curious mental phenomenon that parallels with our sound reasoning invariably just disappeared. He had nothing to prevent him. So it's very, very important that this is what goes on and on. So, but an actual potential alcohol, with hardly exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self knowledge. So many of us think we come in, yes, I have a problem. I can't drink. I'm not going to drink. And they might even be able to do that for a while. But unless you enlarge your spiritual life, sooner or later, the mental obsession usually gets you. Does this happen to everybody? And maybe there's people it hasn't happened to. God bless them. But the majority of people, it happens. And you know what? Why not enlarge your spiritual life? It's a wonderful way to live, to be a God loving, caring person. So they go on to talk about a few people in here. This is another one. This other guy, he was positive that his humiliating experience plus the knowledge he had acquired would keep him sober the rest of his life. Self knowledge would do it. We heard no more from Fred for a while, and we know what happened to Fred. He went out and it became a disaster. Uh, Not a cloud on the sky. One day in a hotel, leisurely dressed for dinner, as he crossed the threshold, the thought came to him that it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails. That was it, nothing more. He just pops in, and he has no defense against the first drink because he failed to enlarge his spiritual life. It is so important. So, this chapter really is about reaffirming that once you have this alcoholism, it's a disaster. You're going to need to have some spiritual awakening. But here we go. But the moment I made up my mind to go through this process, which we're going to outline as we go forward, I had the curious feeling that my alcoholic condition was relieved, as in fact it proved to be. So here we are, where we actually we come to believe that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. It hasn't truly happened yet, but we believe that it can happen. And then we're going to go on in the next couple of chapters to start showing you how it can happen. So that's a lot about this, more about alcoholism. So um, just remember, your defense must come from a higher power, must come from a power greater than yourself. And you can find it if you do the work.
Absolutely, Dan. I think we should leave on another question that might be provoking and connect with a lot of people. Let's say that someone has had a lot of problems with drinking, and now that they're ready to turn the corner, they know they've hurt so many people in the past, maybe financially or emotionally or physically. What route can they take to make amends with those people?
Well, as we had said before, first you got to get honest with yourself that you have the problem, become open minded that you need help, and then you're going to become willing to do the work necessary to find that power, which we're going to go on in the book. But part of that is first acknowledging who you have hurt. Then you're going to need to talk to somebody about it. Then you're going to have to get to the point where you don't want to be that person anymore. And then you're actually going to have to make the amends. You're going to have to go out and apologize where necessary and make financial amends. We're going to cover much more of that later. And I will say, in my book, we have a lot about going through that, how we can do that. So that's the process, and we're going to get to that. So,
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. And if you guys ever need someone to talk to about anything, really, please reach out to Dan. He's an amazing resource. And I thank you for joining us for episode 4.
yeah, feel free to send me any direct messages.